Hey Ben, thanks for being with us. Your game design work has been disruptive, and labeling your games as RPGs appears to be limiting. People that play your games for the first time say, hey, but this is not a real RPG. Do you have a better definition for your games?
On one hand, you might say that trying to create a label instead of just looking at something for what it is kind of the problem. Maybe it's better just to see what the thing is for itself. But on the other hand, a different argument is to say that all the things that are in Microscope that seem to be strange or things that you don't normally do in a game have in fact been things that people have been doing in RPGs all along. If you think about in Microscope, you're making a history, you're making a whole world together. That happens in D&D. It just doesn't happen at the table. The GM makes the world by themselves, and the players see the end result. The difference with Microscope is just that that facet of the game that was previously occurring separately is now happening at the table and is being shared between all the players. And likewise, a lot of people also say it's not like you're in an RPG because you don't have a character, which is bizarre again because in even like a classic game like D&D, the GM never had a character. The GM always played a variety of characters as necessary, and that's basically what you do in Microscope. You play characters that appear and that whenever they come up in history and then might never come up again. So really, it's kind of like when people say it's not a real RPG, what they really are thinking is it's not what it's like when I am a player in a game that is GM'd. But honestly, let's be frank. Microscope's pretty weird, so it's not really surprising that people look at it and say, "What?" It is strange. I fully accept that.
The first time I tried Microscope with a friend, he told me it seemed an ideal tool for writing a book. Do you think your games can also be creative tools for writers?
Yes, definitely. I hear that a lot. I hear people saying that they, use Microscope as a collaborative tool. People have talked about using it to make concepts for movies, for TV series, for novels, things like that. Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. It creates a structure that allows you to organize your thoughts and also kind of lay out a storyline and also make you kind of examine, what if you were to go back and look at how the things that led up to other events, there's a whole cause and effect aspect to it. On the other hand, the key thing about Microscope is that it's about the players surprising each other and that you going into it don't know what's going to happen. You're going to be surprised by other people's contributions and their contributions are going to shape your contributions. So if you're just doing it by yourself, if you're just sitting down at a table and imagining all on your lonesome, you're definitely missing out a lot of the point of the game. You're not going to get quite the same surprising effect as if you would if you did that as a group with other people. Because even the things that seem like the most mundane contributions that people think of, the person contributing it might often think like, oh, that was a pretty small item, didn't really matter. That can go on to become something a pivot point that then inspires someone else to come up with something they wouldn't have thought otherwise and can lead to whole new aspects of a story. And that's really the point of it, that Microscope is really a social tool to get people to be creative together constructively. That's the real function of the game, not just organizing, a timeline in history, because that's really not that hard to do. Just write down a timeline.
It's interesting to discover masterless games where you don't need to play a character. We created a game named Shakedown City, which differs from the usual mechanics. How did you get to writing games where the world building is more central than characters?
I played D&D for a long time. I was the GM for a long time. I would make worlds, stuff like that. There was always a weird thing where it's like I was creating the world and I was enjoying that process even if we weren't playing. Anybody who's a GM world builder will tell you part of the fun is that you get to do that kind of all the time. You constantly get to kind of enjoy the process of making the world and kind of exploring it. But the players weren't sharing in that experience. They were only seeing the thing I had made. It really made me kind of question the division of those two tasks. Like, is it really fair? Am I kind of hogging all the fun by doing all the world stuff. That's kind of what led me to I mean, there are other games that were gmless that existed before that, but that kind of that feeling that maybe we could be playing in a different style, that things didn't have to hinge on me as the GM, that we could all kind of collaboratively participate, is what made me start exploring that kind of game. In a lot of games, there's a disconnect between the characters and the world. The characters, like in a classic D&D game, the characters are often really kind of unrelated from the world. Any other characters could have been dropped into the story and they would have fit. The more ideal case, the classic case, is that characters who are directly central to what is happening, right? That the plot shouldn't exist without the characters. So the bigger question is not so much like world building versus characters. It's like the two should be together. The one should stem from the other. For example, like Kingdom, you look at the entire process of playing Kingdom, you start off, you build this community together, and then you figure out who the characters would be, who would be in this world, who are connected to this community, and therefore connected to each other. That the characters are a direct outgrowth of the situation instead of kind of random people showing up, dealing with a problem. That's, I think, that discrepancy of like, the characters are random adventurers showing up in a situation stems from, like, think about the old school way a GM made an adventure, right? The GM writes the adventure, then goes to the players and say, hey, let's play, make some characters. The characters come after the adventure has been made, right? Kind of backwards. When obviously they should be, the story should be about them. And when you actually play, then they do stuff, they take action, but ultimately maybe the adventure touches upon things that interest those characters. Maybe not. Maybe it's just completely unrelated. So it's that kind of thing of like thinking those two things should be closer together. The story should stem, so the character should be directly connected to the story, and therefore the story has to, it can't be a separate entity that's created before the characters come in.
What's your relationship with traditional role-playing games? Are you an all-round experimenter, or do you like playing even more classic titles?
I think I've already covered, I've played a lot of D&D ages ago. I find it honestly a little more frustrating now, I think, because I do see the things that are missing, the things that maybe, when I played as, for 20 years, whatever it was before that. So I played D&D for like easily 20 plus years, right? Started playing D&D in 1980. And the West Marches campaign, which a lot of people might have heard about, was like in 2001. So that's kind of the majority of my D&D career is like did that 20 years, and then still play D&D every now and then since then. But again, I see those disconnects, right? And it's very difficult to unsee those kind of things, to unsee the kind of discrepancies. And the funny thing is, I mean, like a particular group could overcome those things. We could say like, hey, let's work together. It's just that the culture of D&D and the way that the game is set up doesn't teach you how to do those things, which is unfortunate. It feels like we've missed an opportunity to really help people play the kind of games they want to play. That like, that's the whole point. Like, you want people to have fun, so you want them to get the most fun experience out of the time they're putting into playing a game. And the job of the game, the job of the system, the rule system, in my point of view, is to be really clear to people, to tell them how to get what they want out of this time, right? They're using up time. They're never getting that time back. So a good game, lets them know what's going to happen, what they're going to be in for, but also helps them get the most out of the situation. And any game that doesn't do that, or that kind of muddies the waters, or lets people kind of, muddle along, that's not so great. Anyway.
Today, many people are attracted by journaling games and solo RPGs. Do you think any of your games can be easily transformed in a solo RPG, maybe with some changes?
To me, the thing about these games that is the most important part, right? The whole bit is that we're playing together, right? That it is a social process, that we're interacting and that we're collaborating, we're disagreeing, we're resolving our disagreements. I wrote a post a little while back about how, agreement and disagreement are pretty much the things that make up a game. We all agree something's true. We all agree we're in a city. We all agree our characters have gotten off horses and are riding off into the mountains. But at some point, there's a disagreement. Somebody thinks, even if it's something mechanical like a fight, like, do we win the fight? We're resolving that through dice. There's a disagreement. But in a more world-building game, the kind of games I make, someone might be like, oh, I think in this world, the religion should be based on the stars. They should look to the stars for guidance. Another player might be like, well, I like the stars idea, but I think it should be more like they think the stars are gods. Like, they think the stars are the eyes of gods looking at them. I'm just making this up. I have no idea. This might be the worst example ever, but I'm making it up. But the point is, those people at the table both have creative visions. They both have ideas. But because they disagree, the process has to show us a way to resolve that. So we come back to agreeing, right? We have to agree on what the world is like so we can then move forward. And that happens constantly. We agree. We're on the same page. We understand this world. And then we have a split in the road where maybe it's like this and maybe it's like that. And we got to go back to agreeing again. And the thing is, with the solo journaling, it's a different process because it's just you. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this because, again, like I said, my focus is all on this kind of the social dynamic of getting people to be on the same page. So I would say, I guess my tentative answer would be absolutely yes, if that's your thing, as a structure for fiction. Absolutely yes. And also in the sense that perhaps maybe yes, because the games that I make show you what questions to ask. Like if you're looking at Kingdom, for example, it's pointing out the tension laden in a community that has to make a decision that's going to change its history forever, right? That's a good structure. That's a good structure to work from. Even if you are not playing as a group, that could guide you to good decisions. If you're playing Follow and you're looking at Follow highlights, in Follow, the characters are all working together to accomplish a quest, and the game points out the key challenges they have to overcome in order to accomplish their quest. Anyway, thanks for your time, and hope you had fun.